Hey there and welcome to Utility Sports. Today's video, we are going over the 2020 NBA draft grades. The draft just took place, just concluded. There's a lot of movement during the draft, a lot to keep up with. So please forgive us if there's any little missed detail in this video, but we think we have it pretty much nailed. We went through it, just made the slides now. So we're really excited to bring this to you.
Moving into 30 here, so we have these in order of which team has done the worst toward the best. And we have the Houston Rockets here as the team that did the worst through the draft process. We gave them an F grade. Obviously, they moved away pick 16 and Trevor Ariza in a deal with Detroit, and they only picked up a future pick. We have yet to see exactly what that pick looks like and what the protections are. So it's subject that this trade could look a little bit better if they get an unprotected or lightly protected pick from Detroit. And then in the second round, they used pick 52 to grab Kenyon Martin Jr., obviously the son of Kenyon Martin Sr., a guy who went first overall in the 2000 draft. We are not very high on Kenyon Martin Jr. We don't really think a lot of his skills translate to the NBA, and that's why Houston's here at 30.
Yeah, it was really weird that he didn't really do anything except for train during the season. We had some issues with that. We would have really liked to see him either play overseas or in the States, but he just trained all year long.
In at 29 now, we have another F grade here for the Chicago Bulls. Many of our viewers might not like this grade, but we just think Patrick Williams is a really big reach at 4. We kind of had him more between that 12 to 18 range on our own personal boards, and we thought that the value for him really kind of started around pick 10, and at pick 4, we see that a huge reach with what was on the board. Positionally, the fit is there. He's a defensive player, so it's not necessarily that the Bulls are going to be bad because of this selection, but we just don't think the value is really there. And at the 28th position, we got the Phoenix Suns. We gave them a D grade for their draft. They got Jalen Smith, a player that we think is actually a pretty good player. We just thought at pick 10 it was a little early, especially with some of their need for wing help after moving away Kelly Oubre Jr. in the Chris Paul deal. We thought that they could have used some other players like Devin Vassell, like you'll see later on in the video. And at this point, real quick, we want to remind you guys to like and subscribe. We really appreciate you guys taking your time to view our videos. And right now, 90% of our viewers are not subscribed, so we'd really, really appreciate more of you to subscribe and start tuning in. Now at 27, we have the Denver Nuggets with a D grade. Austin, give us some of your thoughts here on what they pulled in the draft.
Yeah, so for Denver, it was kind of a tough draft, grabbing a back-to-the-basket Zeke Naji. He's not really going to fit in with what Denver's trying to do. They are trying to replace some bigs in Millsap and Plumlee. And R.J. Hampton is supposed to be a high upside guy, but he doesn't have an elite skill, except vertically explosive is his best trait. However, his skills are not very refined. He kind of struggled over in Australia. So kind of a tough haul for the Nuggets.
Yeah, definitely. And going into 26, we have the Utah Jazz here with the D+. They did move away Tony Bradley as well tonight in the pick that they got for Elijah Hughes at 39. And they addressed that backup center need with Udoka Azubuike out of Kansas. For Azubuike, we kind of dislike the pick because of his inability to move out in space. He's also horrendous at the free throw line, a 44% shooter. He's obviously got some positives, really good offensively in the pick and roll game, good finisher around the rim. I believe shot 75% from the field this past year for the Kansas Jayhawks, something definitely worth monitoring. And kind of plays similarly to Gobert, actually the same pick as well. Gobert was also 27. But we just think overall the Jazz could have done a lot better, could have addressed a backup point guard behind Mike Conley as he ages. And there's, quite a few issues we still have with their draft.
And looking at Elijah Hughes here, he played in that zone defense at Syracuse. Really hard to monitor and scout how good defensively he's going to be. He can score a little bit, but defensively, we really don't know what he is. And it's going to be tough for the Jazz, who are pretty much a man-oriented team.
Yeah, definitely. The fit, too, is kind of weird with Jordan Clarkson. Looking at 25, the Detroit Pistons, we gave a C-. They did a really good job acquiring assets. We'll have to give them that. They didn't come into the draft with 3 top 20 picks. They acquired 2 of those, pick 16 and pick 19. So they did a really good job acquiring assets. We just don't necessarily think they hit on those assets. Killian Hayes at pick 7, definitely high upside guy, could really pop in the future. And we were actually talking about this before the draft, that if they did land him, he could be one of the guys that potentially does save their franchise. But we just really don't believe that, do we, Austin?
No, we really don't. We think he's got a lot of ways to grow, but right now he's just not a refined prospect. Isaiah Stewart's a little bit of a reach at 16. Saddiq Bey was a pretty decent value at 19. ultimately was probably their best pick in this draft so far. But for Killian Hayes, it's going to be a tough road playing in Detroit. They have some issues developing guards, so that's a little concerning considering that his skills aren't very refined. I mean, you could consider a high ceiling, what most do. We just don't see that ceiling as high as most.
Going into 24 here, we gave the Portland Trailblazers a C. Obviously, only had one draft selection because of moving the 16th pick for forward Robert Covington and grabbing CJ Ellaby, another wing out of Washington State University, a guy who, doesn't really have a high upside, doesn't really have a lot, going for him long term. But we just think he's going to be a filler piece, and we really like the Rocco trade. That's why we have him here at a C, which is a pretty neutral grade. In at 23, another team with a neutral grade obviously just made a move for Drew Holiday. Jordan Nwora at pick 45 is a okay upside pick. Austin, walk us through Nwora.
Yeah, Nwora, he doesn't do a lot except for give you shooting, and he's not a guy that's going to be able to handle the ball, be a secondary or even tertiary playmaker. So Nwora here is just going to be a catch and shoot guy. Just for the Bucks, it works because that's what they're looking for ultimately. But nothing that really moves the needle for the Bucks here at 23.
Yeah, definitely not. In at 22 now, the Brooklyn Nets obviously acquired Reggie Perry at pick 57. They actually did give up Jay Scrubb in that trade, the rights to him. So that'll be coming later in this video. But a big part of what they did here was acquire Landry Shamet for pick 19 in a 3-team trade between the Clippers and also the Detroit Pistons. And Shamet, not necessarily a superstar type player or anything close to that, but he's going to be a guy that fits in well next to Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan. He's going to help space the floor. He's going to be a threat to run off of screen and rolls. Austin, walk us through Shamet as you know quite a bit about him.
Yeah, for his career, he shoots 40% from three. He's a guy that, like you had mentioned, likes to run off his screens. He started to take a little bit more of a ball handling role, very little, but he has really improved that part of his game and has been an improved defender. Obviously, he's gotten stronger since he was drafted out of Wichita State. But you got to like this trade if you're the Nets. You acquire an established shooter. You know what you're getting with this selection instead of trying to throw a dart at one at pick 19.
Looking at pick 21 here now, we have the Toronto Raptors. We gave them a C+ draft grade, obviously picking up Malachi Flynn, a proven winner, really led San Diego State this past year to a really good record. I believe they were top 5 in the nation for parts of the year, and also grabbing Jalen Harris at pick 59. We were not really, sold either way on that Jalen Harris pick. But Malachi Flynn, we think he comes in, gives them exactly what they're looking for, some insurance in case Fred VanVleet does decide to leave in free agency. And also a guy that, if VanVleet does stay around, will be a long-term option as a backup when Kyle Lowry ultimately either calls it quits or moves on to a new destination. At pick 20 here, we have the Miami Heat. We gave them a C+ as well. Precious Achiuwa at pick 20. We thought was okay value for kind of where he is. He's a, versatile big man that's going to be able to move out in space. A little bit like Bam Adebayo, obviously won't be the offensive weapon that Adebayo is, but we think he's an improvement over Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard long-term. Austin, walk us through Achiuwa a little bit.
Yeah, Achiuwa, once again, another back-to-the-basket guy, not real skilled around the hoop. He uses a lot of his power and athleticism to score. For the Miami Heat is really, like you said, improving over Myers Leonard and getting rid of some of his minutes that he ended up losing during the playoffs. But he's going to be an effort guy. That's what we saw from Memphis. He's a high motor guy, and Achiuwa kind of fits the bill for Miami.
Going into pick number 19 here, we have the Orlando Magic, who we gave a B-. Only did have one selection today, the first pick outside of the lottery, and they used it to select Cole Anthony. Cole Anthony is not a player we were necessarily sold on being a really good NBA player, but we think he's going to be a quality NBA player for a while, and we think the Orlando Magic really did make a good selection here, grabbing him to come off the bench for them early in his career, and good insurance behind Markelle Fultz, obviously with the injury history, and for when DJ Augustine potentially moves on. At pick 18 here now, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who we also gave a B-. And we really want to preface this. This could be a home run pick. Aleksej Pokusevski, they moved up using 25 and 28 and Ricky Rubio to go get him in front of the Dallas Mavericks. And he could ultimately be one of the better players in the class. We fully acknowledge that. But there's also a lot of risk involved in this trade. They gave up a guy who is maybe worth the low-end first himself in Ricky Rubio, and also 2 other low-end first to make this selection here at 17. And it could be all for naught, but we do think they are a team established enough to really, take a risk like this at this point, obviously with all the draft capital they have. Austin, walk us through the Thunder and also what they got with some of the other assets.
Yeah, so for Theo Maledon, he's just going to be a playmaker most of his career. He's going to probably stick around for a while, but he's not going to be able to score the rock at an above average level. He's going to be a below average scorer. For Pokusevski, this could be a really good pick, but this could also be catastrophic for them in this draft. They took some risks with some of these picks that they had. It's gonna be a tough one. They're either going to be at the bottom or near the top for this draft. Hopefully for Sam Presti, he's towards the top because his history of drafting basically outside the top 4 is not pretty.
Going into pick 7 or number 17 here, we have the Los Angeles Lakers, who we gave a B-. Obviously, they used their draft pick this year, pick 28, with Danny Green to acquire Dennis Schroeder. And initially this trade looks pretty good, but obviously after seeing what Danny Green was worth today to the Philadelphia 76ers, we think the Lakers could have maybe done a little bit better. That's why they kind of find themselves in the middle of the pack here. At number 16 here, we have the Indiana Pacers, who we also gave a B-. They grabbed Cassius Stanley at pick 54, a player that we both had seen to be a top 30 player in this class. Albeit close to the 30 mark more than the 15 mark. But at the same time, he's really got high-end athleticism. They've obviously got a really good team already established, and I think this is a worthwhile risk here for them that low in the draft. Austin, what do you think about Stanley?
Yeah, I think that's great. He's vertically explosive. He's extremely quick laterally. This is definitely a pick that could pan out very well. And when you're at pick 54, take some risks. Take some risks on some guys that have some glaring issues. Shooting might be an issue for him, but we think that he'll be able to shoot at least average to slightly above average at the NBA level.
Going into 15 here now, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously, this is the midway point, and they made a move to go get Desmond Bane at pick 30. Obviously, a very successful college player, 4-year starter for TCU with real 3-and-D wing potential, shot 44% in his senior season, and also grabbed Robert Woodard II at pick 40, a forward with some defensive potential out of Mississippi State. And we think overall this is a pretty solid draft and can really move forward fitting what they have already in John Morant and Jaren Jackson and company.
Yeah, I think for Robert Woodard, it's all about defensive upside. He's got a thick, sturdy frame. He's a shot blocker. It's going to be nice for that Memphis defense to have him come off the bench, and I think he's going to be a valuable asset moving forward for the Grizzlies.
Jumping into 14 here, now we have the New Orleans Pelicans. Obviously, last year they took Zion Williamson. This year we give them a B for grabbing Kyra Lewis Jr. at pick 13. This is something we've been mocking for a while now, not necessarily Lewis, but a point guard. Obviously, they got to go into contract negotiations soon here with Lonzo Ball and Clutch Sports, his agency. And obviously that got pretty ugly with Anthony Davis when he requested a trade. So I think that's going to be something they're going to want to hold a lot of leverage. And drafting a really young athletic point guard that could potentially work with Zion Williamson in a bunch of different ways and can also spot up is a way to really hold that leverage. So we really like this pick here for them, and that's why we have them at 14. And at 13 now, the Boston Celtics, a team that had 3 first-round picks, ended up moving one of them to the Memphis Grizzlies. But then ultimately came away with Aaron Nesmith at the back half of the lottery, Peyton Pritchard near the back half of the first round, and Yam Madar in the second round. Austin, walk us through some of these picks. I know you really love one of these guys.
Yeah, so for Aaron Nesmith, it makes a lot of sense just adding more shooting to the Boston Celtics. He shot a great clip in the 14 games that we saw him. Peyton Pritchard's a guy who can really handle the rock. He really came on as a senior at Oregon, but my favorite player from this grouping is Yam Madar. He's a physical point guard. He's able to handle. He can drive pretty well, an above average guy at driving to the rack. He's not able to really shoot at this point, but that's something that they would have to work on. But you're not really bringing him in to shoot. He's going to be a project player. But like they had mentioned, that he's like the Patrick Beverley from overseas. This guy brings it every single game. He's got some moxie to him. I really like this selection at 47 for Boston.
Yeah, Aaron Nesmith, too, real quick about him, gives them some long-term insurance behind the Gordon Hayward situation, which is important to monitor. Going into pick 12 now, here we have the Atlanta Hawks, who we gave a B. They drafted Onyeka Okongwu at pick 6 and also Skylar Mays at pick 50. And we personally really love Onyeka Okongwu. We had Okongwu both in our top 10 mocks. And the only reason that they find themselves with a B grade is because they gave up assets to go acquire Clint Capella last year, and they still have John Collins around. So, the fit for Okongwu, whether or not he's going to be a starter in the first couple of years, not necessarily that he needs to be, but, you might not be necessarily maxing what his potential is early on in his career, which potentially this could have been an A- type of draft, but just the fact that they already have some of those positions established with good NBA players made it a little bit more questionable for us, but still overall a good draft grade. Austin, walk us through the Hawks here.
Yeah, so for the Hawks here, it makes a lot of sense to go get a Konwu. He's going to really he's going to be a good player for the Hawks. However, like you had mentioned, the fit, I'm a little worried. I think there's a move coming. I don't think that Capella and Collins and Okongwu could coexist in an offense. I'm really questioning the fit there, but I think somebody might get moved, and I think that somebody is John Collins.
Yeah, definitely something to monitor moving forward. Going into the 11th team here, we have the Charlotte Hornets, who are picking 3 and grabbed LaMelo Ball there. LaMelo Ball himself, we both gave, I believe, A- grades or A grades, but we didn't really love the second half of their draft, grabbing players like Vernon Carey Jr., Nick Richards. We do like the Grant Riller selection. However, it's a little repetitive based on the guards that they already have added, even though we think he's a pretty talented player. Carey Jr. and Richards both do address a need at center, but we kind of see both of them as, basically dunker, spot sitters, and screen and roll guys at their very best. And LaMelo Ball is going to be tasked with really making that offense as good as possible. We thought they could have really used a wing player in addition to LaMelo. So we think that despite LaMelo being a real box office attraction and something worth bringing a lot of fans to a city that ultimately really needs it for their basketball product, we're not really sold on the back half. At pick 10 here, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. And funny enough, we're kind of sold here more on the back half than we are the first overall pick. Austin, walk us through the Wolves, kind of what you think about Edwards and also their other selections.
I think their biggest thing of the night was reacquiring Ricky Rubio. He's going to be a guy that can come off the bench. He can really mentor some of the young guys like Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell. And I think they shouldn't have traded him in the first place, but obviously they get him back on a pretty good deal. But I really like their pick 28. He's a high upside guy. He was in my top 15, Jaden McDaniels. It's all going to be about if he wants it or not. He had some issues at Washington. Will Morrow's another project player for them, could be a very nice playmaker. Honestly, he has some Ginobili vibes to him. He's a flashy 6'7" forward from overseas. And then Anthony Edwards, he's super explosive, obviously. I don't think anybody will deny that. I do question the fit. I question his drive. Obviously, he had said that before the draft that he really likes football. And I mean, if he was called to play football, he would do that in a heartbeat over basketball. So I'm really wondering how much he's going to work at the game, how much he loves the game. So honestly, for the Wolves, it's a little tough. The talent's there, but inefficiency scares me for him. Kind of gives me a little bit of Andrew Wiggins vibes with that selection.
Now jumping into number 9, we have the New York Knicks, who we gave a B+. They obviously selected Obi Toppin at pick 8, and we just mentioned box office a few picks ago. Obi Toppin will be that in New York. The Knicks are going to be fun to watch. That is one thing to know for sure. We also, Quickly is an okay player, but that's ultimately why the Knicks found themselves at a B+. We both gave Obi Toppin A+ grades on that pick at 8, and Quickly was more of a C level pick for us. So that's kind of why we found them here in the middle at a B+ range. We think Toppin, obviously I'm quite a big Toppin fan myself, as you can tell. And I think his upside in the NBA is really, really high. He's going to be a really good offensive player early. And I think he's got the physical traits that you need to kind of grow as a defensive player, even though he's not there yet. He's got a 7'2" wingspan though. And the athleticism to really, be impactful on that end of the floor. But he's just got to really tighten up that footwork and get lower to the ground often in a defensive stance. But overall for the Knicks, we think Obi Toppin's a great pick here at 8, and moving forward they're going to have to address that point guard position because we don't really think Quickly is the long-term answer. Jumping into the Cleveland Cavaliers here, we gave them an A- grade. Isaac Okoro was their sole pick in this class here at pick 5. Austin, walk us through the Cavs, the fit with Okoro, and also their previous selections in years past.
Yeah, so this is going to kind of help protect their guards a little bit. Obviously, Garland struggles defensively, but Isaac Okoro is very, very versatile. He can guard the 1 through 4, depending on who the 4 is. His coach said he could guard through the 1 through 5, but I question what he actually meant by that. However, Isaac Okoro, arguably the best perimeter defender in the draft. He's definitely a guy that can get after it. He can slash when he's inside when he's shooting twos. I mean, he's very, very efficient. So he can honestly kind of cut the 3-point part out of his game, but I really like the fit with Okoro in Cleveland. It's not one we had really considered. We thought Toppin was probably going to go to Cleveland, but after thinking about it a little bit longer, I think Okoro is a good selection here.
Going into number 7 here, we have the Sacramento Kings, and they honestly got really lucky with how the draft kind of fell for them. Xavier Tillman at pick 35, we're, not really sold on that selection. We think that's just an okay pick. But Tyrese Halliburton at pick 12 could be one of those picks that we're talking about years down the road as a steal of the draft. He is the best playmaker coming out of college. He's a 6'6" frame. He's got a 6'9" wingspan, I believe, and he's a guy who can really shoot the ball from deep. He can shoot several feet behind the NBA three-point line. Even up to the NBA logo in some cases, I believe he'll be able to shoot. And at a really high clip, he shot over 42% from three his sophomore season at Iowa State. Is a guy who's really, on the upward swing in terms of potential. And Austin, I know you really like Halliburton as well. Walk us through his fit with the Kings.
Yeah, so for the Kings, it makes sense because we have a lot of moving parts about to happen. Buddy Hield's gone. The thing about Halliburton is he does not need the ball in his hands to be effective. Obviously, with De'Aaron Fox, that's not going to happen where he'll have the ball in his hands all the time. So I think, like you said, in a catch and shoot role, he'll function. There's a lot of different things you can do. He's one of the most versatile players in the draft. Obviously, people are a little worried about how his shot looks, but he's been extremely efficient with it. And he's not a guy that's going to take bad shots. So I think for the Kings, that's a phenomenal pick with their very first selection.
Jumping into 6 now here, we have the Philadelphia 76ers with an A grade, or an A- grade rather, sorry. At pick 21, they were able to take Tyrese Maxey, a player that Austin and I both like quite a bit. But we also think that they did a good job outside of that first selection. They addressed shooting needs with Isaiah Joe at pick 49. Also made a move with the Dallas Mavericks, sending Josh Richardson in pick 36, who ended up being Tyler Bay. To Dallas for shooter Seth Curry, a guy who is second all-time in career three-point percentage. And also addressed, physicality with Paul Reed, a guy who's, really athletic and explosive. He's kind of raw yet. He's going to be a development project long-term. But they got the needs that they, needed to put around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid for the short term, and also took a home run swing at pick 58 here with Reed. Going into our top 5 here, Austin, we have your Los Angeles Clippers with an A grade. Obviously a team that didn't have the first round selection after moving that during the season for Marcus Morris, but they did make quite a few moves tonight. They traded Landry Shamet in that 3-team deal we mentioned earlier for Luke Kennard. They also made a trade to acquire the draft rights of Jay Scrubb and Daniel Oturu at pick 33. Austin, walk us through what your Clippers did tonight, how you feel about the fit, and kind of what you think about their overall night.
So starting with the Oturu trade, we ended up sending a 2023 second rounder to the New York Knicks, which I just love that because that pick should be later in the draft, obviously, but Oturu, you're getting at pick 33. He's an insurance policy for the Los Angeles Clippers, considering Harrell might be on his way out. There's some other moving pieces, such as JaMychal Green might be on his way out. So this provides insurance for them. Jay Scrubb is a guy that we both really liked. We both had him in our, I believe, top 15 together. So he's a guy that's a lot of his game's predicated on athleticism. He's vertically explosive, but he can score. He has a scorer's first mentality. He's a guy that once Lou Williams is gone could really take over that second unit for the Los Angeles Clippers. So it'd be very interesting to see where Lou Williams ends up, because maybe they trust Scrubb enough if they see a little bit of him that he could take over the second unit for the Clippers. But also the big thing here is the Luke Kennard upgrade over Landry Shamet. Landry Shamet's a catch and shoot guy, run off his screens and catch guy. But Luke Kennard's a guy that can obviously score more without having to go around screens and stuff. I really like him in the half court. Honestly, I think it's a big upgrade for the Los Angeles Clippers, Luke Kennard over Landry Shamet.
Yeah, and if there's going to be a steal in the second round this year too, it's probably going to be Jay Scrubb. We really, really love this guy here at Utility Sports, so keep your eyes on him as we move forward. Now jumping into 4, we have my Dallas Mavericks actually with an A grade. And they were very active tonight as well. Obviously, they took Josh Green at pick 18, a player that many like as a 3-and-D wing, and the Mavericks really, kind of knew what their identity was going in. They needed to address defensive needs, and that's what they did. At pick 31, they grabbed Tyrell Terry, a guy who was personally in my top 10 going into the draft, obviously before I even knew the Mavericks would get him. And I thought his shooting potential next to Luka Doncic would be, extremely viable. We've mocked him there actually a few times at pick 18 on the channel, and we absolutely love his offensive upside. And then also coming back at pick 36 and grabbing Tyler Bay, a guy who was all defense and defensive player of the year in his conference for Colorado. Obviously a high motor guy, someone who's going to, hit the glass hard too. And, kind of brings that thumper mentality for the Mavericks, something they needed. And they also addressed that with Josh Richardson, acquiring him from the Philadelphia 76ers for Seth Curry. Obviously, you know, Curry became a little bit more expendable once we acquired Tyrell Terry. I think Mavericks will miss him early on, especially this next season. But I think Richardson, Terry, Bay, and Green are really, really high-level acquisitions. And I think the Mavericks are in a better situation today than they were yesterday. Going into number 3 here, we have the Golden State Warriors. And honestly, the draft kind of just fell for them into a perfect place. Obviously, the news about Klay Thompson is really, really tough to hear. And we're hoping that he's not out for long. And we're hoping that this injury isn't as serious as it seems to be possibly. Because they had a home run draft here and they would be back into contention this season if he is healthy. Austin, walk us through what the Warriors kind of grabbed at 2 and 48.
So for the Golden State Warriors, it's all about getting better right now. Unfortunately, with the Klay Thompson injury, that makes it a little tougher because James Wiseman was going to fit in perfectly with the Golden State Warriors. Nico Mannion is also a guy that was regarded as a possible first-round selection. Obviously, took a big tumble all the way to pick 48, and the Jessup pick was pretty much a nothing pick. We don't think he's going to play very much. But getting James Wiseman at pick 2 was really big for them and their future. Unfortunately for Klay Thompson, that's going to be a tough road back from that Achilles injury. The Warriors are set up pretty well having James Wiseman. He, at the very, very worst, is going to be an elite screen and roll guy. He's going to be a phenomenal defender for the Warriors. So I think that's a great pick for Golden State with that pick 2. And, you know, they made a nice selection with Nico Mannion, who's going to be their backup point guard in the second round.
Jumping into 2 here, we have the San Antonio Spurs, a team that we haven't talked about in the lottery since Tim Duncan. And, of course, their first time back, they get the second best grade in the class. I think Devin Vassell is personally one of the top 2 selections in the entire class. And him and I were actually joking earlier in the year when we were kind of going through some of the prospects. This is earlier in January. And we joked about Vassell being a Spur based on his play style. And yet here he is, a two-way wing, comfortable in the mid-range game, shoots the ball really well from deep, really high release point, kind of Kevin Durant-esque. And we see a lot of Paul George in him, to be honest, as a guy who's able to create off the dribble. Needs to grow as a playmaker yet quite a bit, but he's lengthy. He's going to be really, really disruptive on the defensive end. Obviously something that Greg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs really admire and, you know, kind of look for in their players. And I think Vassell's a home run pick here at 11. I think that there's a few teams ahead of the Spurs that are really going to regret not grabbing him. Austin, looking at the Spurs, what do you kind of think about them? And also, I think Trey Jones in the second round was a pretty solid acquisition.
Yeah, Trey Jones for many other teams I wasn't going to be fond of if it's going to be at the back end of the first round. But getting him at pick 41 is extremely valuable for the Spurs. Trey Jones is definitely going to be a guy that will be able to step in, handle that second unit. He plays a good perimeter defense. He's not an explosive athlete or anything, but he's a guy that takes care of the ball, knows how to take care of the ball. And he can score just a little bit, but that's not obviously going to be his main strength. He's going to be very similar to Tyus Jones, which is a viable NBA point guard. He's not going to be highly regarded as a point guard in the league, but he will be a solid backup for the Spurs. But Devin Vassell's the big ticket item here. You get a guy was top 3 on both of ours. Devin Vassell, of course he goes to the Spurs. Of course he goes to the Spurs because the Spurs are a very smart organization. Sorry for everybody that passed on him because he is going to be a phenomenal talent.
Yeah, he was number 2 on my board, and personally he was the player with the most two-way star potential in my opinion. But now jumping into the player that was number 1 on both of our boards, a consensus number 1 for us, and obviously the team that grabs him here at 9 finds himself as the number 1 grade in the class here with an A+. Denny Avdia is obviously the player we're talking about. And also in the second round, they came out and grabbed a guy who was a 4-year starter for the Michigan State Spartans, a player who's been really productive in his college career, and I think will provide some stability behind John Wall as the backup point guard early in his career. And I think Avdia and Winston are the best duo drafted here in the class. And I think that they're definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with in Washington.
Yeah, it's just really unfortunate that Washington was able to get him all the way at 9. Props to all of you Washington Wizard fans. You should be extremely happy with getting him at pick 9 early on in the draft process and all the way up to the draft. We thought Onyeka Okongwu was the pick pretty much no matter what. We had mocked that every single time in our mocks. However, that's not how that worked out. And the Cassius Winston pick, getting him at 53, an established college point guard, you know what you're getting out of him. But the big thing for him, big leader, he's an extremely hard worker. Love the pick at 53 with Winston.
Yeah, jumping into Avdia real quick again too. For the people who don't really know that much about him yet, I mean, he's a 6'10" forward with ability to handle the rock, shoot off the dribble, create for others. Honestly, his offensive potential is through the roof, and he's a competitive defender. He's a guy who has, pretty solid length. He's a big player, like I mentioned, at 6'10", and the potential is through the roof. And he's going into a situation with a team that has a shooter already in Davis Bertans, a really good offensive player in Bradley Beal, and a gifted two-way point guard in John Wall when he's healthy. It's a great situation for him, and Wizards fans, like you said, should really be excited moving forward. That'll conclude our NBA draft grades here, guys. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. We really, really do appreciate your feedback and support. So make sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up with the utility sports content. And once again, thank you guys for all your support.